Hey there. Dating can be complicated, right? Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's magical, and sometimes it's downright terrifying. In today's video, I'm sharing 3 horror stories about exes who took things way too far. Trust me, after you hear these tales, you might look at your own relationships in a whole new light. Before we jump in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and while you're at it, give this video a like if you enjoy spooky stories. If you're into all things creepy, go ahead and subscribe. All right, let's dive into these twisted ex stories that will leave you double-checking your locks tonight. I never thought I'd see Sam's face again after we broke up. We had an explosive relationship, passionate at first but quickly turning volatile. I ended it when his temper became too much to handle. I blocked him on everything, returned his keys, and even changed my phone number. For over a year, it was radio silence. Then he showed up on my doorstep. It was late, close to midnight, and I was dozing off in front of the TV when I heard frantic knocking. My heart lurched. I lived alone in a small townhouse complex with a few neighbors I barely knew. No one knocks on my door at that hour unless it's an emergency. Grabbing a kitchen knife just in case, I crept up to the door and peered through the peephole. There stood Sam, drenched from the rain, dark hair matted against his forehead. His eyes darted around like he was checking to make sure no one else was watching. My stomach dropped. Every memory of our last fight rushed back. The hole he punched in the wall, the insults, the fear I felt. "Please," he called through the door. "I just need to talk. Just a minute." Against my better judgment, I opened the door a crack, the chain still on. "Sam, it's late. What are you doing here?" My voice wavered despite my attempts to sound calm. His eyes were wild, desperate. "I have nowhere else to go," he said, voice cracking. "I lost my job, and I've been staying with a friend, but that fell through. Please let me in." I hesitated. A year ago, I would have told him to go to hell, but seeing him shivering in the rain tugged at my empathy. I unlatched the chain. The moment he stepped inside, I felt a twist of regret. Something about his presence set me on edge, but I tried to ignore it. I offered him a towel and some dry clothes from the back of my closet. For old time's sake, I guess. He thanked me profusely, then asked if he could just sleep on the couch for the night. "I'll leave tomorrow," he promised. "I just need a place to regroup." I agreed, once. One night. That was my limit. I prepared a blanket and pillow, then locked myself in my bedroom, heart pounding. Sleep was impossible. All I could think about was how Sam was just a few feet away, that this was the man who used to rage at me over the smallest things. But by morning he was gone, leaving only a note. "Thank you. I owe you." For the next 2 days, everything was back to normal, and I almost convinced myself it was a strange dream. Until I came home from work on Thursday and noticed the smell of coffee in the air. I never made coffee that morning. I froze, scanning my kitchen. My favorite mug sat in the sink. Fresh coffee grounds were sprinkled on the counter. "Sam?" I called out, heart hammering. No answer. I did a quick search of the apartment, no sign of him. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I locked every window, every door, and spent the evening on edge. That night I barely slept, imagining footsteps and creaking floors. The next morning I decided to check the attic. It was just a small crawl space I rarely used for anything except dusty boxes. Feeling paranoid, I balanced on a chair, pushed open the hatch, and shone my flashlight inside. There, next to a stack of old winter coats, was a sleeping bag. My sleeping bag. And a single plate with crumbs on it. The air left my lungs. Sam had been hiding out in my attic. Fear electrified my body, but also a rush of anger. I yanked the sleeping bag down, marched through the house, and called out, "Sam, I know you're here. Get out!" Silence. I dialed my neighbor, an older woman who occasionally greeted me in the hallway. My voice trembled as I explained the situation. She advised me to call the police, which I did. An officer arrived, took my statement, and searched the attic carefully. Sam was gone. The officer warned me to find a new place to stay or upgrade security. Someone had obviously broken in, and they could come back. I felt violated, my privacy shattered. That evening, I packed a bag to stay with a friend across town. But first, I had to head back inside to grab my laptop. As I entered the living room, I found Sam standing by the window, framed in the dying light of dusk. My scream caught in my throat. How did he get in again? My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. He spoke softly, almost calmly. You weren't supposed to find out like this. I missed you. And I thought maybe, if I showed you I could be around without hurting you, we could— Stop! I yelled, fists clenched. You're trespassing. Get out before I call the police again. He raised his hands in a placating gesture, but his eyes glinted with something unhinged. We were good together once, don't you remember? I'm different now. I backed away, reaching for my phone. Sam lunged, knocking it out of my hand. His grip tightened around my wrist, and I let out a sharp cry. All the memories of his aggression flooded back. I fought to break free, kicking and clawing. His voice rose in desperation. Stop fighting, if you'd just listen. But I wouldn't. With every ounce of strength I had, I slammed my knee into his ribs. He gasped, releasing me. I grabbed my phone off the floor and darted toward the door. Sam blocked my path. In a wild burst of adrenaline, I hurled a lamp at him, forcing him to stumble aside. I ran out of the house, barefoot, sprinting down the street until I found someone walking their dog. I cried for help, and they dialed 911. By the time the police arrived, Sam was gone. Again. I moved out that same week, relocating to a different city entirely, changing my phone number yet again, living with a friend until I found a place with a better security system. Months passed, and I never heard from Sam. I told myself he was just a messed up ex who'd hopefully found help or left me alone for good. But every so often, I come home late from work, and my new doormat is slightly askew, or a window's unlocked even though I know I locked it. The police haven't found any evidence. My new landlord thinks I'm just paranoid. Still, I can't shake the feeling that Sam could be watching me, waiting. Even in my own home, I never feel entirely safe. I realize now that escaping someone's grip can be harder than just walking away, because sometimes they follow you into the shadows you never even knew you had. They say you never forget your first love, and for me that was Shane. We were high school sweethearts, inseparable at 16. But as we grew older, our paths diverged. While I left for college, Shane stayed behind, chasing small-town dreams that never quite panned out. We tried long distance for a while, but it wasn't enough. We drifted apart, or so I thought. I was 25 when he re-entered my life unexpectedly. I was at a local coffee shop back in town visiting my parents. When I turned from the counter with my latte, there he stood, a grin spread across his familiar face. "Long time no see," he said, a light teasing in his voice. He looked the same, but also different. Thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes. We caught up in that casual, awkward way exes do. I told him about my new job in the city, my travel experiences. He talked vaguely about working on some projects. The entire conversation made me uneasy. Something felt off, like he was trying too hard to act normal. But then again, I was the one who'd shown up in town unexpectedly, not him. That evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It was good seeing you. I've missed you." I knew immediately it was Shane, though I never gave him my new number. My heart sank. A trickle of dread started to form. I replied politely but kept it short, hoping he'd get the message I wasn't interested in reconnecting. Over the next 2 weeks, I got more texts. Some were sweet memories. "Remember when we danced in the rain junior year?" Others were downright creepy. "I know you went to see that new horror movie last night. Next time, invite me." The fact he knew my activities, even the specific movie I saw with my friends, had me on edge. I confronted him in person at a grocery store, cornering him near the produce aisle. "Shane, how do you know where I've been? Are you following me?" I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one else heard. He just shrugged, feigning a hurt expression. "I'm not following you," he said quietly. "We live in a small town. People talk." His explanation rang hollow, but I let it go, not wanting to make a scene. Later that night, I woke at 2 a.m. to see a light shining through my bedroom curtains. I peeked outside. A car idled across the street. I couldn't see the driver, but the silhouette resembled Shane's. Fear pulsed through me. I snapped a photo with my phone, but by the time I opened the camera, the car sped away. Things escalated a few days later when I received a handwritten note slipped under my parents' front door. It read, "I've been waiting for you to come back for years. I still have our pictures, our songs, everything we shared. We should be together again. Forever." The signature at the bottom, "Your only love, Shane." My parents, alarmed, insisted I call the police. The local sheriff, who'd known Shane's family for years, seemed reluctant to take me seriously. "He's had a tough life," the sheriff said. "Probably just needs closure." But it didn't stop. Soon I found more notes taped to my car windows, tucked into my mailbox. Each one was a disturbing blend of longing and obsession. One included pictures of me from high school with my face circled in red marker. Another note referenced recent outfits I'd worn. I was being watched. I tried blocking Shane's number, but he'd just use a new one. I told my parents everything, and they became extra cautious, checking windows and doors each night. Tension simmered in the house. My mom would jump at the sound of the phone ringing. Then one evening after dinner, I walked outside to grab something from my car. My dad's motion sensor lights blinked on, revealing a small object on the hood. It was a USB flash drive with a piece of tape labeled "Play Me." My heart sank. I knew it was from Shane. Against my better judgment, I brought it inside, locked all the doors, and plugged it into my laptop in the living room with my parents at my side. The screen filled with a slideshow of photos. Shane and me in high school, at prom, at the lake, at my graduation. Then more recent ones. Me at the coffee shop. Me walking into the movie theater. Me in my bedroom, taken from outside the window. My mom gasped. My dad clenched his fists. I felt sick to my stomach. The final image was a black screen with white text. "I won't let you go again." We called the police immediately. This time the sheriff promised to talk to Shane. I didn't trust a simple chat to fix this, so I packed a bag, prepared to return to my apartment in the city first thing in the morning. I felt guilty leaving my parents, but I couldn't stay in that town another night. At 3 a.m., a loud crash shattered my sleep. I scrambled out of bed and flicked on the lights. My parents raced into the hallway as I grabbed my phone. Another crash came from the living room. We huddled behind the door. My dad, trembling with anger and fear, yanked it open to reveal Shane standing amidst broken glass from the window he'd smashed. His eyes were wild, chest heaving. "I had to see you," he said, voice raw. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" "How dare you break in here?" my dad roared, grabbing a baseball bat. "Get out before I—" Shane brandished something metallic in his hand, a small knife. Fear shot through me like lightning. My mom clutched my arm, whispering, "Don't move." "It's not supposed to be like this," Shane muttered, tears streaking his cheeks. "You should have stayed. We belong together." I tried to stay calm, stepping forward with my palms up. "Shane, put the knife down. We can talk, okay?" He stared at me, eyes flicking between my parents and me. I saw desperation there, but also a terrifying resolve. "You always say we can talk," he hissed, "but then you leave." Sirens wailed in the distance. The sheriff must have been close by. Shane noticed the lights flashing outside. He backed away, shaking his head. "They won't understand." The door flew open and 2 officers burst in with guns drawn. Shane panicked, turning toward me, knife still in hand. In a split second, an officer tackled him to the ground. Shane's scream echoed in the house, a sound of raw anguish. They disarmed him and hauled him away, reading him his rights. I stood paralyzed, tears streaming down my face, mind reeling that this was actually happening. It took Shane going to jail and a restraining order for me to finally feel safe again. Even so, for months after, every unexpected noise at night set my nerves on edge. I avoided visiting my hometown unless absolutely necessary. The memory of Shane's eyes, filled with a twisted mix of love and mania, haunted me. I learned that obsession can masquerade as devotion, and sometimes a broken heart can turn truly dangerous. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. My phone would buzz in the middle of the night, notifications from a private number. I'd check, only to find blank messages. Then an ominous feeling settled in when I realized these messages coincided exactly with my new posts on social media. Every time I uploaded a photo, within minutes, I'd receive a silent text. I couldn't figure out who was behind it until I noticed an odd username liking my posts, @RememberMe313. No profile picture, 0 followers, following only one account, mine. Creepy, right? It started with harmless comments like, "looking beautiful" or "nice place." Then they turned personal. "I remember when you wore that red dress on our first date." My stomach lurched. Only one person could reference that outfit. My ex, Caleb. We hadn't spoken since college 3 years ago. Our relationship ended badly. He was clingy and controlling, tracking my location, showing up unannounced. I left him behind when I moved to a new city, blocked him on every platform. Yet here he was, apparently creating a new account just to watch me. As the comments grew bolder, I blocked @RememberMe313. A few days later, another account surfaced. @MissingYouDaily, again with no profile pic, leaving cryptic messages like, "You can't shut me out forever." Then more late-night silent texts began, each one jarring me awake, as if reminding me Caleb was always there, waiting. I considered going to the police, but the messages weren't overtly threatening. Plus, I had no proof it was him. My friends insisted I take it seriously. One even suggested I delete my social media altogether to starve him of information. I was stubborn. I didn't want to let an ex bully me off my platforms. Instead, I tightened privacy settings and tried to ignore the silent texts. Then, one night, I was relaxing on the couch scrolling through Netflix when my phone buzzed. Another private number text. This time, there was a photo attached. A shot of my apartment building. The angle suggested it was taken from across the street. I bolted upright, adrenaline surging. I ran to my window, heart hammering. Though it was dark, I could make out a figure standing under a street lamp, phone in hand. I texted back a single word, "Caleb?" and received no response. The silhouette walked away, fading into the shadows. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was long gone. They took a statement but had little to go on. I felt violated, knowing he'd found my address, staked out my home. The next day, I mustered the courage to check my DMs on Instagram. Sure enough, a new handle, @YouCan'tHide, no followers, no posts, had messaged me a flurry of images, places I visited regularly, screenshots of my social media stories, pictures of me taken from afar. In every photo, I looked clueless, unaware someone was capturing me. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Desperate, I turned to an old friend who was a tech whiz. She suggested I change all my passwords, enable two-factor authentication, and even recommended a private investigator who specialized in cyber harassment. The PI advised me to keep a record of every message, every suspicious incident. So I did. Hundreds of screenshots, logs of missed calls from unknown numbers, time-stamped photos of the messages. It was horrifying seeing the evidence pile up. A week later, I got home from work to find a small bouquet of lilies at my door. My name was scrawled on a card, but no signature. Lilies were the flower Caleb used to give me when we first started dating, back when he was sweet and romantic. I hesitated to even bring them inside. Instead, I called the PI to let him know. He said to file another police report, which I did. But again, the police said they lacked concrete proof linking it to Caleb. There was no return address, no camera footage, no eyewitnesses. Then my phone rang. Another unknown number. This time, I answered. A deep, distorted voice crackled through. "You can't ignore me anymore," it said, followed by a harsh laugh. My blood ran cold. The call ended, leaving me shaking on the couch, tears pricking my eyes. Everything felt so surreal, like I was living in a nightmare. A few nights later, as I lay in bed, I heard a soft click by the front door. My heart nearly stopped. I tiptoed to the living room, phone clutched in my hand, ready to call 911. The doorknob jiggled. Someone was trying to get in. I froze, holding my breath, not wanting to make a sound that would let them know I was awake. After a moment, the jiggling stopped. I heard footsteps retreat down the hallway of my building. With trembling fingers, I checked the peephole. No one. I must have spent an hour cowered by the door, phone ready, convinced they'd come back. The next morning, I found light scratches around the lock, like someone had tried to pick it. Enough was enough. I decided to stay with a friend across town, but first I had to gather some clothes. That afternoon, while packing, I got a text from an unknown number that said, "You're leaving me again?" The breath whooshed out of my lungs. I hadn't told anyone except my friend privately about my plan to leave. Was he somehow listening to my calls? My friend arrived to pick me up, and as we headed down the stairs, We passed the mailroom. A tall figure stood in the corner, a hoodie pulled over their face. My heart leaped into my throat. I turned away quickly, but my friend gave me a concerned look, mouthing, "Is that him?" I couldn't see the face, but my gut told me it was. We rushed out of the building and sped off in her car. For a time, staying with my friend felt safer, but my anxiety never subsided. I barely slept. Each day, new messages arrived. "I know where you're hiding. Don't think you can ghost me. I'll find a way in." My friend insisted we install cameras around her apartment, at least as a deterrent. She was supportive but clearly terrified on my behalf.
Then one evening, the cameras caught motion at 3 a.m. A man in dark clothing stood at the edge of the property staring at the windows. I replayed the footage over and over, trying to see if it was Caleb. It was too dark, too grainy. But the next day, we found a note wedged under the door. "Come home. This isn't you." My PI finally gathered enough evidence, screenshots, phone records, the camera footage, to push the police into taking real action. They tracked the phone numbers to burner phones purchased in Caleb's hometown. A search warrant was issued. By some miracle, they found Caleb in possession of one of the phones and stacks of printed photos of me in his desk. He was charged with stalking and harassment. A restraining order followed. In the weeks that followed his arrest, I learned more about how he'd orchestrated everything. Keylogger software on my old laptop from college, which I'd briefly used again after my new one broke, plus social media sock puppet accounts, plus physically following me whenever I visited my usual spots. The idea that someone I once loved could invade my life so completely shook me to my core. Even though he's been charged, I still flinch at unknown numbers calling me, and I've locked down all my social media to private. It's an ongoing battle to feel normal again. Every time I see an idle car outside or notice a new account requesting to follow me, my heart skips a beat. I remind myself he's not supposed to come near me, but nightmares of him lurking outside my window still wake me up at night. I've learned the hard way that some exes don't just move on. They burrow into your life, hiding in your feed, your phone, your very sense of safety. And once they're there, it can take more strength than you ever knew you had to finally push them back into the shadows.